Hello, people of the internet. This is Kaiju Noir,
And it's Pete.
and we're here with our review for the last film that we saw for 2013, Saving Mr. Banks.
This movie came out in 2013. It's still considered part of the 2013.
Well, of course, it came out like a couple weeks ago.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, because it's been pretty busy the last couple of weeks with like New Year's and stuff, and so we haven't been able to watch Mr. Banks until now in 2014. But we want to finish off 2013 before we can get to our best and worst video. So. For those of you who don't know, Saving Mr. Banks is the story of how Walt Disney, portraying this film by Tom Hanks, managed to convince the author of Mary Poppins, P.L. Travers, played by Emma Thompson, to give him the rights to create the now famous film based off of her works. And you have P.L. Travers, who's this woman. She's had gone through much trauma, I guess you can say, in her life, to the point where she's become jaded. She's become very cynical about the world, and throughout these years, she has developed these, I guess you can say, like mental blocks in her mind that prevents her from moving forward in her life. And then you have Walt Disney, who is much more positive, very outgoing. He's the kind of guy who he will not stop until he gets what he wants. And it's a movie basically with these two individuals, such huge egos, such huge personalities, and huge opinions clashing with each other until they eventually meet an agreement. Now, I wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts going into Saving Mr. Banks, Pete?
Now, I have unfortunately never completely seen Mary Poppins.
Really?
Really.
So once again, this is a movie that's related to an older movie that you have not seen.
Yes, and in this case, it's unfortunately so. But I was really I was taken aback that a concept for a movie was like this, because I had no idea whatsoever that that there was a history behind the movie itself. And of course, every movie has a history behind it, but something like so complex or something so grand, it was definitely a surprise for me.
No, definitely. Yeah, I love movies about making movies. I just love the process of what people have to go through to get a film made, and especially with a Disney film, because I mentioned before in previous reviews, I'm a huge Disney fanatic. Disney was a large portion, took a large part of my childhood, and to see this story being brought to life through these actors. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of this was romanticized. I'm pretty sure a lot of characters did not act the way they did, or probably didn't even exist at all. But when adapting this story, it was like they were adapting a legend, pretty much. And the legends are supposed to be larger than life, pretty much, I guess you can say. So even if everything was not 100% accurate, which it's like 90% of the time never actually is accurate, 100% accurate, it's still a very fascinating story, and they have such compelling characters in this film.
I completely agree, and the fact of the matter is, though, most of it comes off the two characters, both Mrs. Travers and Walt Disney, of course, because like you said, they're two big superpowers, two big powers, clashing at ends. One wants to retain her ideas, and the other wants to bring new things into life.
And I love the way the character Mrs. Travers is so protective of Mary Poppins, because that's her character. That's her. She feels like that character's like her family. And as we later learn, like throughout the movie, we are treated with flashbacks showing a story of her childhood, and her story of her childhood self parallels with that of her adult self. So you go back and forth between these two time periods, one in 1906 and the other in the early 1960s. And you really see why Mary Poppins means so much to her, that she's willing to defend this property to her grave, and that how much it connects to her personal life, because Mary Poppins takes a lot, according to this film, takes a lot of elements from her personal life, especially when it came to her father, which played a major part in her growing up.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and it's funny because even Walt Disney in the movie he himself realizes that through a personal experience that he had involving his character Mickey. I don't know if you remember that specific scene where he's talking about it himself,
Right, right.
but
These two characters, they have so many things in common. They both have made creations that they hold very near and dear to them, and they've both also grew up in very, not poverty, but they grew up from very small, low beginnings, and rising their way to the top. And another thing is like very fascinating. Like P.L. Travers, she's like we said, she's very cynical. She's very grouchy. But she doesn't come off as an unlikable character. Rather, well, in my opinion, she comes off as very fascinating. You see, she's dealing with a lot of these, like, not mental illnesses, but it feels like she's goes through like agoraphobia, where she's afraid to go outside and interact with people. She seems to have obsessive compulsive disorder, and where she wants everything to be a certain way, a very specific way.
I agree with you, but I feel like they do make her out to be unlikable, but then that unlikability gives her a charm that really grabs at you, and you have to admit when there's so many things like little tidbits here and there. This. She just can poke at anything, and again, as that's something you would hate, but seeing it come from her, it's kind of charming, but at the same time, you're just like, oh, this lady.
Yeah, you can definitely say that. And as for Tom Hanks' portrayal of Walt Disney, Walt Disney's just this legendary figure, and I love this, he really bring, like, Tom Hanks, he's such a likable actor, he's such a likable guy, and I thought they could not have picked a much more suitable actor to play Walt Disney. And, you just have a smile on your face every time he's on screen. And I don't know, but it seems to me that he gave Walt Disney the southern drawl. And I don't think I've ever seen that in what footage I've seen of Walt Disney.
It definitely did seem that way, and God, every time I saw him, I was just thinking to myself, Tom Hanks is getting old. he's getting up there in age, but like you said, I feel like in the movie they play him, like as a very humble person. Even when he's out in the public, he's very nice, he's very kind. I've never really researched into how Walt Disney was, in real life.
In real life, yeah.
But I assume they did stick close to his character.
And of course, they didn't make him to be like a super perfect character. He himself has this kind of thing. He's kind of like a bit selfish, where he's like he wants what he wants what he gets, and
At the end of the day, he does want happiness in this, but he's still a businessman as well.
Oh yeah, very very strict businessman.
And even near the end, you still get that feeling, like he's a businessman. And there's a specific scene. It's not too much to talk about, but you see that he still cares about his business, and he doesn't want like bad images or a bad image for certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's very sure to keep that squeaky clean image there, but it's sort of a reflection of his values, of what he wants to bring. He wants to bring that innocence and sense of hope to the world. And you can tell that about him right from the beginning. And finally, I guess one other character I really want to bring up was Paul Giamatti's character as Ralph the driver. And I really like that they have this growing friendship between him and Mrs. Travers.
I think it was cute. I think the supporting characters were nice. In general, I'm just gonna go all out and say, because there's really only in total just about like 4 or 5 major supporting characters, and I feel they all pretty much have good chemistry. Again, like you said, Paul Giamatti as the
driver.
The driver, they seem like they do share the biggest connection. I think even to the point where I think he's like the only one that's been able to get an autograph from Mrs. Travers.
Yeah.
Overall, I just want to say I really enjoyed the supporting cast chemistry with Mrs. Travers. They're always it seems like they're always trying to please her, no matter how hard she pushes, and they do end up pushing back, but they're always they just want to make it work, because it's all up to Mrs. Travers.
And what are your opinions on the flashback sequences featuring Colin Farrell as the father of Mrs. Travers?
With the flashback scenes, I feel like they were done pretty well. Like, initially I wasn't sure too much of what was going on, but I got the idea of it. She's growing up, and we're gonna find out what happened to her. What emotionally changed her. Because as a young girl, she's a very happy girl.
Hmm.
She's very imaginative. She loves her dad. She loves her family. And you just watch her change little by little. Basically, you watch her grow up. You watch her grow up very quickly, in fact, because of the situations that happen in her life.
Hmm. Yeah, it was. I wasn't sure exactly what direction they were going with the flashbacks. I just figured that Mrs. Travers was just gonna remember back to a time when things were much more happy and hopeful, but that wasn't it really, because you see step by step how she became. She viewed the world in a very different light. With her father, with her father, he was a very outgoing man, very happy, very joyful. Always saw the positive things in life, but the responsibilities of life led him to a life of drinking.
See, I don't know if I can agree with that. I think when he was on screen, he was putting up a show, an act to show that to his daughter that everything was okay, but deep down inside, because you would see him change,
Hmm.
when he wasn't around her, you would see, he felt much more, because he didn't just have,
Hmm.
you know, so I feel like again, he was like more than anything just putting on an act
Hmm.
for his daughter, because when it came to her mother, it seemed like they were already aware of a very distinct problem
Hmm.
that grew throughout the flashbacks,
Hmm.
and it was definitely an unfortunate situation.
Hmm.
And I think they play the
Hmm.
really well.
I thought that the parts where you say that he's putting on a show, I felt like that's the person he wants to be, and that he wants to be there with his children. He wants to play make believe and play with them, but I feel like he just couldn't handle. Yeah, he was already in a lot of trouble, both with his health and with financial problems, health problems, marital problems, and I just feel like I felt like that wasn't really. Of course, he would put on an act by saying that everything's going to be okay when everything really isn't. But when he's playing with his children, when he's bonding with them, I felt that was real, and that he wishes he can do that all the time. But by doing so, he would have to shirk his responsibilities, and by doing but he never finds that balance, which really leads to like the themes of this movie, where it's really about hope. It's about redemption. It's about forgiveness, and it all relies solely on the father on the father, both and which you can see is carried over into the story of Mary Poppins, which leads to why the title is called Saving Mr. Banks.
And this is why I wish I had seen the movie.
Yeah. Well, when it came to Miss Mary Poppins, I love that movie. I saw it so many times as a kid because my parents would purchase like every single Disney movie on VHS, and it's also one of my mother's favorite movies. And she's a very huge, big fan of the actress who played Mary Poppins. So, what was her name? Like Julie Andrews, I believe.
I believe so.
I
Yes.
could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was it. And oh man, just listening to them like coming up with the ideas, coming up with like the animated penguins with Dick Van Dyke, the songs. I got like so much nostalgia when they sing "Let's go fly a kite."
I would turn to you and see the excitement on your face. You'd already be mouthing the words,
Uh huh.
and I definitely like seeing them how they developed the movie. I like that.
Hmm.
Even as someone who didn't see the movie,
Hmm.
I can definitely appreciate that. On a personal side note, I'm fortunate with my family. While we did watch a lot of Disney movies,
Hmm.
it was very rare for us to get into a non-animated Disney movie.
Yeah, that was it for us too. But I guess Mary Poppins had enough animation to keep us going for a while. Well, not going for a while, but to grab a hold of my what 3-year-old 2-year-old attention.
I think I would have liked that as a kid, but like I said, unfortunately, I was
Mm-hmm.
never shown the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and over time, I just I skipped it. I skipped it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never gone out of my way to really search for a live
Mm-hmm.
action Disney film. Like, oh, what movie do I want to see today? Whatever. I'd see
Mm-hmm.
an animated film, Disney animated film, or a non-Disney animated film. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather go with the animated because that's what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
used to. Yeah,
Do you have a VHS player?
I still do. Yeah,
All right, I'll bring over my VHS copy. We'll watch it together.
sounds good.
And I gotta say that ending, man. I cried during that ending.
Did you really?
Yeah, I just had these tears of joy.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it during the scene where when she's watching the movie?
Yeah, yeah. When they watch the movie and it all comes together.
I felt like it was a very heavy moment. Here comes the feels train. I felt it was very like strong and unique, but maybe because I didn't watch the movie, maybe I didn't tear up all the way. But I definitely did feel some strong emotion.
Uh-huh.
It's all in the face. Just even yeah. That's all I can say about that.
So I guess we're ready for final ratings.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for me, Mary Poppins was such a huge part of film. It was one of the movies I saw all the time as a kid, and seeing the process of how it went through, and seeing these legendary figures being brought to life and given such depth and likability and something very complex. And this also, you have this story and supporting characters and this flashback sequences, which provides a secondary story, all comes together to create such an emotional and such a joyful experience for me. And I don't see why I can't give this film a 5 out of 5.
Let me ask you this: has this movie not been based off, like, say it was based off like
Mm-hmm.
a fictional movie or a movie that wasn't really made,
Mm-hmm.
like as a film itself?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about it? Like not just because it's paying, it's because it's say, attached to the Mary Poppins, thing, but on as its own, how do you feel about the movie?
Well, even then, even without the element of Disney or of Mary Poppins, you still have this fascinating character who is on this path to of redemption, of getting of this character who is not letting the past take over her life, the past take over her future. And how it's a character of her redeeming herself to move on with her life, while at the same time making amends with the people that she knew in the past. And the character of Walt Disney, even he wasn't Walt Disney, was such a charming character. He's kind of like the person who almost like a mentor figure who's leading the path for her. And so yeah, even without Disney, there's these characters are still very likable in a way that I can still enjoy the movie. And I mentioned to you before, I love movies that take place during like the 50s, that 40s, 50s, 60s, that like early World War II-ish era. And of course, like I mentioned in the beginning, where I love movies about making movies.
One last thing, I know I'm asking you all these questions, but because personally I do find myself agreeing with most of what you're saying, but do you see any flaws personally in the movie, or anything that or that you saw like clashed, or something that stood out to you that in a negative way?
The only thing there was only the things I can find were technical, really, and that would be one thing, there were these lens flares whenever the camera was near a window, and you would see a very faint blue line across the screen. And of course, it's nowhere near as bad as J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies, where it's like a blinding light in your face. But I don't know, it's just very distracting, especially since we actually those things are intentional. The cameras today have the ability to block out that sort of stuff, so they put that intentionally to be a little artsy. I don't know, that kind of distracted me. Another thing would be when they're trying to make it look like this 1964 or 1962, when you see stuff that's kind of modern-ish, like the Walt Disney logo. I thought that was a modern, but I'm not sure if that was actually how it looked like. And Disneyland, I actually went to Disneyland earlier this week, and just having been there myself, I can tell that it was not the Disneyland of the 1960s. It looked looked like they filmed it right there filmed on location. It was kind of distracting seeing modern Disneyland there in the 60s.
All right. Well, now as for what my thoughts on the movie, I really enjoyed it, and like you said, this movie has a very like a special feeling to it. It carries very human emotions. You really get dragged into it, and I really enjoyed the movie, and I'm really sad that I didn't grow up with Mary Poppins. That's a very sad thing for me to see, because seeing how excited you got whenever a music would start, like a music cue, or how they would experiment with the music. Change this, change that. It got some excitement in me, and like I said, the characters were great, the interactions were great, and for that, I'd have to give it a 5 out of 5 as well. However, when it comes to films like these, I mentioned this with Gravity as well. As amazing as these movies are, I feel like some of these movies for me are more like a one time watch, or a once in a long time. I can't, because movies like these, I feel like they carry commitment. You have to, they have like a long run time, or you really have to be settled in the mood for these kinds of movies. And like I said, I do give this movie a 5 out of 5. But for me personally, I feel it's like a one time watch, or once in a long time. I do recommend going out to see it in theaters, especially if you have seen the movie, and if you haven't watched Mary Poppins, that I would recommend you watch Mary Poppins as well.
Well, that is our review for Saving Mr. Banks. We hope you've enjoyed it. And I'm Kaiji Noir.
And I'm Pete.
And until next time, everybody, take care. But you know what? Since this is the final review for our 2013 movies, let's end it on a song, shall we? I guess. Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. The medicine go down. The medicine go down. Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in the most delightful way.